Hello and welcome to the Oddschecker betting show. This is the Punchestown Day 1 preview coming to you, recording on the Monday, looking ahead to the first day of racing over at Punchestown and looking at Tuesday's racing. I'm your host, George Elek, and I'm joined by two expert guests. We have Oddschecker's very own tipster, Andy Holding, before he flies out tomorrow to the racing itself. Andy, looking forward to your trip over to the Emerald Isle?
Yeah, it's been a while since I've been to the Punchestown Festival. It was a regular haunt for the thick end of sort of 10-15 years. Never used to miss it at all. Me, Sam Turner and a few, the William Hill racing radio mob used to go over and terrorise the nice pubs and clubs afterwards. Yeah, because of COVID and one or two commitments, obviously family-wise. Yeah, I think I've missed out for the last 3 or 4 years. So it's good to get back. I'm really looking forward to it. It looks as though we got a good few cards to cover as well in this podcast as well.
Yeah, looking forward to getting through it. Some cracking races all through the week, and also delighted to be joined by racing broadcaster, sports broadcaster Johnny Ward as well. Johnny, you're going to be there on Thursday, and by the sounds of it, if anyone sees you, could be a little bit worse for wear come the day. A few corporate free drinks on the cards.
Yeah, I could be a bit worse for wear the following day anyway, but I tend to perform all right in the day. It's the day after I struggle with. But Mr. Holding will be there, so if we cross paths, we'll hopefully have a few winners to toast at that stage. Yeah, so it's just looking at the decks, I'm delighted with the numbers. I have to say, for the first 2 days, George, it looks like pretty much everyone you want to be there is there.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those who maybe just follow kind of the bigger festivals and things, or maybe got hooked over Cheltenham a few weeks ago, some of the clashes, just in terms of quality of racing, there's absolutely no step down here. There is some elite stuff taking place over the course of this week, starting on Tuesday. We'll get into the racing in just a second, but Andy, for those looking to have a bet themselves, maybe who are going to kind of go through the form and follow what you guys are saying, what kind of conditions can we expect over the course of the week? I'm sure you've had your weather app out a few times over the weekend and this morning.
Yeah, the weather maps I've been looking at anyway suggest that we're pretty much going to be set fair over in the Kildare area, unless Johnny's got any further updates. But I don't think we're going to get too much appreciable rain. And I think up to now, I think the Clerk of course has done a good job maintaining it, good to yielding in places. And of course they move the rails, don't they, Johnny, as well, pretty much every day. So we tend to get fresh ground by and large all the way through the week, certainly on the hurdle track anyway.
Yeah, I spoke to Gordon Ennitt yesterday, and he was kind of saying that some of his bumper horses, he's just put them out for the summer now. He says he's a bit worried that the ground in general is actually a little bit faster than you'd want. It's been a warm sort of few days in Ireland with very little rain. It's warm today. I think it's going to be a pretty warm week, so it's a difficult one for Punchestown. I mean, they obviously will have to keep it safe, and we saw at Cheltenham what can happen. But if you wanted horses that I'm going to oppose some horses, I think, that are more staying types, more stamina horses. It's going to be pretty speedy by Punchestown standards.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, after the Cheltenham Festival, I think the hoses may not come out until absolutely necessary ahead of this week. Before we get into the racing, and we're just going to go through the card on Tuesday. This is our Tuesday episode. We'll be recording a Wednesday preview straight after, and then later on in the week we'll be doing the rest of the days as well. But do download the Oddschecker app. There you can get the very best prices that we'll be talking through as we go, the best bookie offers, free bets, place terms, crucially, with lots of firms giving you extra places in certain races where there are lots of runners too. So do download the app now, and also Andy's tips straight to the app every morning of racing, not just for the Punchestown Festival, of course, or any major festivals, but every day's racing, except when he's getting a well-earned break, I should say, earning his break every day of the year elsewhere. We'll start then with the first. It is the 340 at the Mares Novice Hurdle, and Dinoblue is the 7-4 favourite ahead of Party Central at 3-1. Grandji is 4-1, Brides Hill 13-2, Instit 8-1, Lunar Display 11-1, 25-1 bar, 11 runners. And Andy, I'll come to you here first, because Dinoblue, regular readers of your column, regular watchers and listeners to this show will remember how keen you were on Dinoblue after that first run. Fair to say she, despite huge market support for pretty powerful connections, things didn't go to plan at Cheltenham, and over 2.5 last time, again, didn't really set the world alight, but comes in here as still as a fairly short price favourite with a couple of horses that have performed better than her in similar races recently. So how do you assess the top end of this market now?
Yeah, the one thing I will say about this race, and if Johnny agrees, but it looks fairly a fairly weakish affair, let's say. we've got a lot of refugees out of certain races rather than actual winners or the big players in the Grade 1s, horses that disappointed, etc., etc. So it's certainly up for grabs anyway, let's say. It's certainly a race that Dinoblue should be very competitive in, there's no doubt. I actually thought she ran a little bit better than you suggested last time out at Fairy House behind Brandy Love. Brandy Love was a really impressive winner, despite still running towards a left, towards the near side rail. She still was very impressive in beating a good field. They went a good gallop that day. And Dinoblue, I thought, stayed on quite eye-catchingly. It was a much better run than it was at Cheltenham. I think in hindsight, Mark Walsh probably rode a little bit too aggressively that day. He rode as if he was riding him at Clonmel on a weekday minor meeting when he could sort of boss and dominate a field, but you're not necessarily going to do that in a 19 runner Grade 2 at Cheltenham, and that's exactly what he did. Unfortunately, she wasn't quite up for it off the back of only just one run. But I think she's definitely the best horse coming into this race anyway, as far as I could see. Party Central, again, a little bit disappointing for me, probably more so even in that race at Cheltenham behind the Love Envoy, because she travelled really well off the speed, and yet she found absolutely nothing. So there was mitigating circumstances for Dinoblue in my eyes, because she was just a little bit too prominent, a bit too keen. And Dinoblue has obviously gone on to run well since. Grandjew was well beaten in that Fairy House race. Can't see turning the form around with Dinoblue. I suppose the interesting one's the bottom one, Instit. Again, another Willie Mullins representative. She was well backed on a rules debut at Limerick back in March. She travelled really well. She looked like you winning two out, and then Danny Mullins went for her, and there was nothing really there. The cupboard was bare. She got beat by a horse called Mano Work, who is just an okay juvenile. Won at Leopardstown, but was way short of the standard required for a Cheltenham Festival, let's say. So unless it was just strictly down to fitness, form alone, I think Instit has got a bit to find. So in summary, I think Dinoblue is the right favourite. Would I back at 7-4? Not necessarily sure about that, but she's the selection anyway for this podcast.
Just quickly before we move on to Johnny's thoughts there, you mentioned that she stayed on well last time. So is a step back and chip, therefore not a bit of a negative here?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I'd have to say that. But she did show a huge amount of speed at Clonmel first time out. Almost too much speed for her own good at the Cheltenham Festival. She was just too keen from an early stage. She was in front after a hurdle, which is not the way to ride her really. So I think they could probably revert to being quite aggressive again with her back over 2 miles. They basically rode her to get the trip last time out, and she did get it, but she was just outstayed by stronger stayers on the day, if that makes any sense. Or just a better standard of horse. Brandy Love would be, a massive odds-on shot to win this. But without the Brandy Loves in this world in this race, then like I said, it's very much open and up for grabs.
Johnny, how do you see it?
Yeah, Andy's reference to refugees there reminds me of a quote in Withnail and I. London is a city coming down from its trip, and there's going to be a lot of refugees. And there might be a few refugees. I like the terminology, Andy. I know what you're getting at here. I think Dinoblue should probably win. I think they completely changed tactics on her at Fairy House. It was almost like they rode her A, to get the trip, and B, to kind of get her to just chill out, because they didn't put a hood on her. They put a hood on Brandy Love the last day. It looked like Dinoblue might have wanted a hood, but they didn't put a hood on her. But I thought, she was caught a bit flat-footed out of her ground coming to the third last. She didn't have much chance. She was a bit untidy at second last without it making much of a difference. But if you look at how she ran relative to Love Envoy, that was much more in keeping with what they expected at Cheltenham. And if that's the case, basically, she should be Party Central, who is probably a bit of a bridal merchant. As much as she's had a great year, she found nothing at Cheltenham. And Dinoblue was so well backed on that occasion. She was obviously working really well. I think this should be straightforward enough tactically for her. Again, it's unusual for William Mullins to run 3 horses, to run 3 times in succession as quickly as that. So I think they probably think they're on a bit of a mission retrieval with her. Not sure I'd be bothered about taking 7-4, but for me, she's definitely the most likely winner of the race. And it'll be interesting to see how the market works out. But I thought the performance at Fairy House was very reassuring in the context of what she did at Cheltenham.
Anyone else you would be looking to back at the prices here, or is it a bit of a no bet race for you?
Bit of a no bet race. Bride's Hill would have a chance. I mean, she'll have no issues with the ground. She's coming back after obviously disappointing last time. As as Andy said, Instit was well fancied the last year. That form is nowhere near good enough, and you'd imagine would have an awful lot to find. So, not really. I'd if I were having a bet in the race, I'd probably just back the favourite.
Good stuff. On to the second race on the card then, the 4:15, the Champion Novice Hurdle over 2 miles, and Sir Gerhard is 4-6 to win this one. The Ballymore winner at the Cheltenham Festival. Dysart Dynamo 15-8, second favourite, of course, went off favourite for the Supreme before falling from the front. Mighty Potter 8-1, Vina Adanza 33-1, and Gatsby Grey 50-1. Not the most appealing betting heat, I guess, this, Johnny, but certainly interesting in terms of the two runners at the top end.
Yeah, I think, unless I got this wrong, I think Sir Gerhard was a shade of odds against sort of yesterday or post declaration time. The one kind of caveat I'd have, when this race took place last year, I couldn't figure out the market at all. I don't know if, I'm sure Andy had a view on the race at the time. Echoes and Rain was sent off 8-13. Blue Lord was sent off 15-8, even though Blue Lord had won so well at Cheltenham, had plenty in hand on ratings, and was ridden by Paul Townend. So I couldn't figure out why the mount of Patrick Mullins was backed as well as she was, and she ended up winning. So, you know, maybe the jockey bookings, I wouldn't necessarily say, oh, definitely Sir Gerhard is the one here. But for me, I'd far prefer him to Dysart Dynamo. I think Dysart Dynamo was definitely in trouble at Cheltenham when he fell. I know he likes his track. It'll be very, very hard to maintain that gallop here, though. And if Sir Gerhard if he puts in a good round of jump and he's well able to travel just off him, I think he's plenty of pace, this horse. I think the issue at Cheltenham was whether he'd stay or not, as opposed to if you ran the Supreme. I don't think that would have been a problem for him at all. I'd be very, very confident that he'll win this, to be honest.
Very confident there to justify the 4-6. One of those maybe for those who like to have an ACCA or a multi-bet over the course of the day or the week. So Gerhard, maybe the one for Johnny to put in there. Andy, do you agree with that?
I do, yeah. I'm surprised at it. Is he says 5-6 in a place? Is it?
No, right? 4-6, basically everywhere.
Oh, right, yeah. That's a bit of a shame. I was going to say 5-6 or somewhere in around that market isn't a bad price, because I think he's just miles better than this lot, as his odds suggest. Obviously, Dysart Dynamo's on a bit of a retrieval mission. I think going right-handed might help Dysart Dynamo. I didn't think he looked all that comfortable at Cheltenham, to be honest, at any stage. He was just wide to the moon. You watch him go down at the start. He was keen. He obviously, broke the tape as well early on. He was just too keen to get on with it. He basically run his race by going past the stands, and he did the rest of the journey until he fell on adrenaline, I think. He was absolutely punch drunk, I think, when he fell. There was nothing left in the locker.
Did John Bon have a part to play in that as well? I mean, they just
absolutely, yeah. I think the two of them softened each other up. There's no doubt about it. I think it affected John Bon just as much as it did Dysart Dynamo.
Yeah.
Look, he's going to be off in front. Small field, tactical scenario. He's going to be ideal for him. That's when he was good in the Moscow Flyer. Not totally ruling him off here, but like I say, I don't like horses like him that give themselves very little chance in a race, and it's an all or nothing job with the Dysart Dynamo. I feel, whereas I think you can ride Sir Gerhard anyway. You can make the running with him if you wanted to. I presume they'll drop him in and let Dysart Dynamo, give him a lead till as far as he wants. But look, he's just a very, very strong stay. He's got plenty of, tactical speed for 2 miles. He's won over 2. He's won over 2.5, and he beat 3 Strike Life, who absolutely bolted up at Aintree off the back of a hard season. So the only negative I could see is he run below par last year in the bumper behind Kilcrit. After looking the dominant force in his division, that's the only negative I could come with. Other than that, then I think he's a good 4-6 shot.
Good 4-6 shot there. Sir Gerhard, the one in this second, the Champion Novice Hurdle there for both Andy and for Johnny. We'll move on then to the handicap hurdle over 2 miles as well. Third race on the card, the 450. As I say, we're recording this on Monday morning. Only one firm out at the moment. That's William Hill. And they are priced up as follows. Glan is the 5-1 favourite. Ardler 6-1. Esky Lane 15-2. Far Out 17-2. Hearts of Trumps 10-1. Great Bear 12-1. Goudelage and Tax for Max and Clifton Warrior all 14-1, 16-1 bar, 18 runners at the moment. Hills are a 5th to 5 as it stands. Probably be a couple of firms who even go 6 places tomorrow, Andy. Any views on those early prices now?
Yes, I've got to be honest. I'm a bit selfish here, but I was rather hoping that we'd avoid some of the handicaps. I could keep 1 or 2 of these up my sleeve until tomorrow morning, because I'm going to be playing quite heavily in the handicaps, because a lot of the conditions races, we know the form, we know that they bet how they should bet, and there's not many ricks in those races, and there's not therefore that much way in way of value. But in these kind of events, particularly the UK bookmakers probably wouldn't know the complete time of day with every single horse. So there is an opportunity perhaps to have a little bit of a touch here and then everywhere. But I'm a big fan of Ardler in this race, Mickey Halford's horse. Just screams to me as if Mickey's had this race, or certainly this meeting on his mind for a little while now with this horse. The fact that he finished second early on in the season back in November to Grand Jury, horse of Henry de Bromhead's, who has been a smidgen disappointing since, only in the sense that he hasn't quite gone the way perhaps the connections thought he would have done. But he's run a little beyond Ginto in the Lawlers of Nace, was still a respectable one in the context of like a handicap. And this fella, Ardler, pushed Henry de Bromhead's horse all the way, and he got beat a length back in November. He's subsequently gone on to win in a big field at Navan, when he went off quite a big price actually, because he looks as though he got a good form chance. And then he was sent off favourite in a very good novices hurdle back at the same track next time out. And although he got beat and finishing second, he got beat to the boys winner, the Martin Pike winner at Banbridge. It's probably the biggest mistake of the whole festival for me, Banbridge. I marked off on my notes that day Martin Pipe, because he was trained by Joseph O'Brien. He'd won in a fast time in a novice hurdle, and I thought, if this runs at Cheltenham, I'm definitely going to be all over this. And I didn't put him up, and I really was annoyed. I kind of like talked myself out of it on the day. But that time figure that day back in January was really good. And Ardler, I thought, ran really well to only get beat a couple of lengths. I think the good ground will really suit this fellow as well. I think he's been quite shrewd in the sense that he's kept him away from soft winter ground all season and just pot hunted him, run him on when the ground's, just on the easy side of good. So conditions are ideal. He goes there fresh. I think I'm a mark 125. He's more than workable. So yeah, he's probably my best bet on day one. Ardler in the first of the handicaps.
Ardler 6-1 as it stands at the moment, with just the one firm, Hills, who are out at the moment. Johnny, that's a strong one from Andy. Have you got a similarly strong view on the first handicap of the week?
I do actually, and it's not Ardler. I totally respect his chance. I think Ardler and my selection might well be actually sort of locking horns a bit here in this. I looked at it yesterday. Hills, fair play to Hills for going up 5 places, pricing up before anyone else in an 18-runner race. So like, if you can get a few quid on with Hills, you've great options there. Glan, I thought she won readily last time. That looked a strong handicap, and it was actually 3 mares dominated. I tipped the horse I was second. Very likely race horse Willie Mullins. The third horse is also trained by Willie, and obviously Esky Lane was 5th in that race. He travelled well. He just might have a small bit too much weight at this stage, 146. But I'm fascinated by Great Bear, who's made the switch from Tom Gibney to Henry de Bromhead. Is a horse that has never actually won over hurdles. He's been placed, I think, 5 of his 9 runs he's been placed. He often makes the run, and he ran an absolute blinder at this festival last year from the front, and he didn't get a soft lead either. He was taken on. He finished 3rd in a race in which I think Light Brigade was 2nd. Tom Gibney has an 8% strike rate with his hurdlers the last 5 seasons. Henry de Bromhead has 15, so nearly double that. Henry de Bromhead would have better horse, and Tom Gibney's no mug. But Henry de Bromhead's horses have come into form big time. He was in great form at Kilbeggan the other day. Darrow O'Keefe has a terrific strike rate for Henry as well. So this horse on the stable switch, an unexpected stable switch, I think he's fascinating off 127. Very competitive and good races on the flat. He even would suggest to me that he's only 6-year-old as well. Seems to have been around longer than that. So I think he's a fascinating runner. If he can improve for the stable switch, I think he must have a great chance. And Ardler as well. Mick Halford, I think he's had 3 jump winners in the last 5 seasons. He's so few jumpers. So, I mean, this would mean a lot to him to have a winner here. And that horse is fascinating as well. It's a really interesting race, I think.
Absolutely. Great Bear, 12-1 as it stands at the moment. The one for Johnny to keep an eye on. Ardler 6-1, as we say, for Andy. Let's get the forecast up. How about that? It wouldn't be a bad way to start the week. And to the William Hill Champion Chase next up, and Energumene is the 8-11 favourite. Chacun Pour Soi, a different beast over in Ireland. Normally 7-4. Andy Dufresne 16-1. Envoi Allen 18-1, returning to some form as we saw back at Cheltenham in March, and Captain Guinness 33-1. 5-runner affair, but no shortage of quality here, and a really interesting tussles, particularly between the top two here, Johnny.
Definitely, yeah. Only 5 runners, but I think this race is well up to scratch. And even Envoi Allen, I think there was a time in the Champion Chase where a lot of people were wondering, "Oh my God, is this the day for him? Is he going to bounce back?" He was well backed. He was only sent off tens. Kind of hard to believe that he was beaten. It was hard to believe he was beaten 30 lengths the end, George, the way he travelled, because I don't know, he'd had a wind up, but he kind of did look like he stopped a bit. So there's still maybe physical complications. Patrick Mullen said that he didn't feel Chacun Pour Soi was necessarily going as well as people thought he was when he unseated. He was sent off 8-1. Energumene was sent off 5-2. So I mean, unless there's a theory that Chacun Pour Soi doesn't travel, he's been brilliant in this race in the past. He's going for his second win, and Willie's going for his fourth in a row. Unless there's a thing that he doesn't travel. But for me, Energumene, he probably should just win. Could the market have gotten it that much wrong at Cheltenham? And he did power up the hill. He looked like the winner pretty much the whole way with Shishkin flopping. And in fairness to him, the only defeat he had there was against Shishkin when he produced a brilliant performance. So I think he should win. 8-11 is probably a fair price, to be honest.
Do you not think it is fair for Chacun Pour Soi's record here and the other side of the Irish Sea to be factored into his price, or do you look at it as being, I know certainly Patrick Mullins doesn't really buy into the theory that it's he's made excuses basically for every poor run over this side. But do you not think it's understandable that would be factored in, and that's why they're closer in the market here than they were at Cheltenham? Yeah,
I don't know any logistics of being unable to travel on a boat for a couple of hours to have a race. Every horse. We see it out every week that horses can do it. So you can make excuses for Chacun Pour Soi and all his performances, his 3 performances in Britain, and maybe he was actually going fine in Cheltenham. I'm just not sure that it should suggest that. If he were 8-1 at Cheltenham and Energumene was 5-2, is it going to be that much of a difference here when Energumene is essentially quite flawless anyway? So I don't know. Yeah, I think I'd prefer him at 8-11 than Chacun at 7-4, to be honest.
Andy, where do you sit on the whole Chacun quandary?
Yeah, there's obviously plenty of evidence now, isn't there? Or enough evidence to suggest there is an issue, isn't there, coming over to either Cheltenham or Sunderland, wherever it might be. He just doesn't seem to playing to his strengths, is it, one way or the other? He's just such a difficult one to fathom, because on his day he's just amazing. And he's usually amazing at this meeting, by the way. The last 2 times he shipped up here at Punchestown, he's been even better than he has been like at Leopardstown, and he's been good at Leopardstown. He's just a creature comforts also. Just doesn't want to go too far in his box. Basically, I don't really know. But look, I don't think I'll beat Energumene anyway, regardless of how you see him at his form in general terms at Punchestown. Because let's face it, Energumene was unbelievable here last year, wasn't he? When he absolutely thrashed Janadil. So I don't think there's any issue with him over the track either. And his time figures are better. I've got all the data on Energumene and all the data on Chacun Pour Soi in the last 3 or 4 years, and Energumene comes out top every single time you download the sheet. So unless Chacun Pour Soi is going to improve again at the ripe old age of 10, then I don't see him beating the younger horse. So again, I agree with John. I think 8-11 is a fair price.
Well, I'm sure even for those who aren't watching this or listening to this, the Sir Gerhard and Energumene double is sure to be a pretty popular bet, I think, on day one of the Punchestown Festival.
Yeah. And you're right.
You're getting 1.891 to 1, so just shy of 2 to 1 about the double there, which could, given seemingly both Johnny and Andy thinking they'll justify those short prices, could be one way to play in a couple of races, I guess, unless you're backing the favourite. It doesn't make much appeal in terms of betting heats. There are 2 bumpers on the cards. We've got the 6 o'clock and the 7:45. No prices out at the moment, and I spoke to the guys before we came on air, and no strong views in either of those races or in the 7:10, which is the cross country. Again, no early prices there either. So just one more race left to cover on this show, and I'm certainly plenty of prices and plenty of opinions abound. I've got no doubt here for the Champion Novice Chase over 3 miles. where Bob Olinger is the 6-4 favourite. Capodanno 5-2, Fury Road 7-1, Beacon Edge 10-1, Miller's Bank 11-1, Lifetime Ambition 12-1, Shannon Rose 20-1. And personally, from my own punting perspective, to see a pretty vulnerable favourite in Bob Olinger at 6-4 and only 7 runners makes me very, very sad. But Andy, I'm hoping you can still flag up here what we can, where there might be a bit of value.
Yeah, I think this is the most vulnerable favourite on the card as far as I could see. I mean, he was absolutely on his feet, wasn't he, at Cheltenham? He crawled up the hill on his hands and knees, didn't he? He ran the slowest speed figure the whole week. I mean, basically, Galopin Des Champs just got him on the ropes and just kept jabbing away. And in the end, the white flag was waved, and it was just a real shame that Galopin obviously fell. We're dealing with a bit of a freak horse in the shape of Galopin, so you've got to give him some credit for at least offering some kind of resistance to as far as he did. But he just completely broke his heart, and I'm just not sure how he's going to come back and sort of face up to it after that's such a pummeling. Plus the fact that he's now over 3 miles. We just don't know whether he will definitely stay. There's a school of thought that he will, obviously point-to-point winner, but until he goes and proves it, then there has to be an element of doubt. And I think that Capodanno will reverse the form with him. The day when they met early on in the season, obviously Bob Olinger at the time was right on song, and 2.5 miles was very much his trip. But if you go back and watch that race again, Capodanno went with him for a long way. Then he was actually coming back at him on the run-in. And he's just been crying out for 3 miles. Always has been Capodanno. He ran over 3 miles at Cheltenham, and I thought he was a bit disappointing that day. I know he ran okay to finish 4th in a Grade 1, which technically on paper is his best ever effort. But I was expecting perhaps a little bit more from him. He just didn't jump with the fluency that he normally does. And I think the key to him is going right-handed. I've watched him a few times now. I think the Fairy House, the Punchestown of this world, suit him a little bit better. That inside track just didn't help him at Cheltenham 1 iota. Plus the fact the ground was absolutely bottomless. And when you've got a horse who's perhaps a little bit more careful than normal, trying to plot his way around in a Grade 1, when they're going a good gallop, he was kind of like half looking after himself a little bit as well. And I think Mark Walsh was riding him accordingly. So I think we'll see a more aggressive combination of horse and jockey on this occasion at Punchestown. Plus the fact the ground's more in his favour. He's won at this meeting before. And like I say, I think 3 miles round here is going to be absolutely bang on for him. So I'd be giving one more go for Capodanno. I've long been a big fan of this horse, and I'm hoping he's finally going to prove me right.
Capodanno is 5-2 pretty much across the board. Interestingly, just noticed as well, obviously most firms, given there are 7 runners, are a quarter to the 2, but Betfred going at a 5th of 3 as well. So if you really are an each way thief, get yourself down to a Betfred. Johnny, how do you see this? Do you agree with Andy that the Bob Ollinger's there to be shot at?
Yeah, I think you could make a strong case for backing him at 6-4 and a strong case for laying him 6-4 if you're to presume that he stays the trip, which I think is very, very likely. I mean, then if he runs his race, he probably beats these. I think he's just a better horse. The way that they spoke about him all year, they were absolutely flummoxed how badly he ran at Cheltenham, and I don't know. I mean, you could tell a long way out there he wasn't going. Henry de Bromhead's record with first-time tongue ties, off the top of my head, I doubt it's something he does very often. So I don't really know what to make of that. I think if you take away his Cheltenham performance, he's going to be a far shorter price here. Capodanno is a decent horse, but he wouldn't have his ability, and I don't really see him reversing the Punchestown form even over this trip, as much as it will improve him. Like Rachel gave Bob Olinger a bit of a squeeze turning in, and he put the race to bed fairly quickly. But at the same time, you have a first-time tongue tie. You do have that slight stamina issue, and then you have the fact that he ran so badly at Cheltenham. So it's probably a no-bet race for me. I'd probably bet Fury Road if I were to have a bet in it. I think, he obviously missed Cheltenham. He ran very, very well at Aintree, albeit in a race you can pick holes in. He's very good in his day. He was brilliant earlier on at Leopardstown this season. Now, he obviously backed that up at the Dublin Race Festival with a poor run, but he loved this ground. And 7-1, I think he's going to run a solid race. He's won at Punchestown before. He'll have no issues coming back here as much as he pulled up here last year. It'd be a tentative vote for me. I'm intrigued as to the market here, because Bob Olinger could easily go off odds on here. If they're very happy with him at home, he's probably an odds on shot here. But I don't know. I don't like backing horses at the tail end of the season who flopped the last day, have a first time tongue tie, and are stepping up in trip. Just too many negatives at the prices.
Yeah, fair enough. 7-1 across the board, including with Betfred, who I mentioned are 3 places as it stands at the moment. Positive mention there from Johnny, but not quite as keen to get against Bob Olinger. And as you mentioned earlier in the show as well, Henry de Bromhead's yard certainly in much better form now than they were over the Cheltenham Festival week as well. That brings our first day of the Punchestown Festival preview to a close. We are going to be recording a Wednesday preview shortly as well when prices are out. So do check that out and subscribe to the Oddschecker YouTube channel. And you can find these podcasts on any podcast platform as well. Thank you very much to both Johnny and for Andy for sharing their wisdom and their tips with us. Hopefully a couple of winners in there as well. Do download the Oddschecker app for the very best prices, bookie offers, free bets, place terms and tips to straight to the app every morning of racing. And hopefully it's the beginning of a great start of a great week of racing. And hopefully will be a couple of winners in there as well. But as ever, please do ensure that you're gambling responsibly.